The night is quiet. No birds coo in the boughs overhead, no animals snuffling through the thick underbrush. The stars twinkle in the sable sky, cold, distant, and foreboding. Dark things skitter in the surrounding shadows, hunting silently, with many eyes and many mouths. You come to a sudden, unsettling conclusion that you are not alone. A cold chill crawls its way up your spine, as a horrible realization dawns upon you. You are trapped in a place hostile to all sentient life. A place so terrible that its name is spoken in hushed tones throughout the civilized world, lest one breathe life into the nightmare. You are in Australia! Oh no! I'm kidding, it's not quite that bad. It's just Dungortheb. The eight-legged horde has been unleashed. Dungortheb is our third new faction to be added to the Silmarillion Total War multiplayer docket. Their armies, if you can call them that, are composed of lightly armored Duso-Manuthan tribal orcs, arachnids of unusual size, and a ferocious freak parade of eldritch horrors that time forgot. I am very excited to spotlight the denizens of the Valley of Dreadful Death to you, so let's take a closer look at some of our new friends. Hello everybody, as you may have gleaned from the introduction, Dungortheb will be the subject of today's video. This battle is a 1v1 between Dungortheb and the Avari, who you saw in the last video. This is on a map made by myself using a number of new and improved Halloween assets, as well as a number of just brand new assets that have been added into Silmarillion Total War's battle editor. So, it's Halloween themed. This has been created with our upcoming tournament in mind. We're going to be having a tournament in November. Prize pool at the moment of $500, which is pretty impressive. That will be split between first, second, and third places, with 300 of that going to the first place team. 3v3 format, gonna be awesome. Hope you guys tune in for it. In any case, let's take a look at the Dungortheb roster, and as was the case with our last Avari video, I will be going into excruciating detail. So if you're an absolute psychopath and you don't care at all about this new faction, its mechanics, how it works, etc., then feel free to use the timestamp down in the description. But for those of you normal people out there, let's take a look at Dungortheb a little bit closer. So, let's start with the overall faction concept. Dungortheb is our first, I don't know if I can say it's our first, but I would say that it's our first truly monster-centric faction. Angband, of course, can use monsters very effectively. They've got some of the best monsters in the game, Balrogs, Loki, things like that. But Dungortheb does kind of take that to another level and steps away from Angband in a few key ways. One, it is an orc faction that is totally capable of skirmishing you down, which is something I wanted to experiment with because I don't think anyone's really done a lot of that. Maybe a little bit of Dol Guldur in like DAC, but this is a very skirmish-focused roster. Most of the orc units that they have from the Duso-Manuthan, or Mard tribe, as it means in English, they are all light infantry. They do have a decent amount of locked morale units as well, although their skirmishers are able to be rounded off. One other thing that they do not have is unmounted spearmen. Now, they do some Manuthan Hunters, which is a archer unit that I don't think is present in this battle. They have a bonus versus cavalry, but they are also archers. So it's not really a replacement for spearmen, but it does help them a little bit and open up a few extra comps. In terms of other anti-cavalry options, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but the first unit I have for you today is the Duso-Manuthan Flesh Terrors. This uses a whole bunch of different assets from a whole bunch of different modders. Elder Scrolls is one of them, Castellan, and the Hungering Maw are another two such sources who have contributed to the creation of this unit. I think they look quite unique, very tribal. They're a little bit heavier looking right now, but that's something that we will be changing in the future. They will basically be shirtless barbarians with the odd little bit of of armor, mostly in the form of these like hammered together helmets, very mass-produced, and their infantry is basically just there to die. The JmonsterTW Flesh Terrors are a perfect example of that. They are light infantry, they have bonuses in woods and scrub, and they die like dogs. The one thing they do well, however, is they do a lot of base damage and a lot of charge damage. I can't quite remember the numbers off the top of my head, and they're subject to change anyway, so it's not really all that important. However, suffice it to say that they are very efficient when it comes to playing the role of shock infantry. Because their charge values are high enough, they can do quite well in that role. However, they are very, very low on melee defense, and it is extremely easy to kill them. That being said, they are also mid-tier, so they come with a mid-tier price tag. So how you want to use them really depends on you, but for the most part, the intention behind most of the Orcish roster is 1, to be efficient skirmishers, and 2, to die in the place of things that you actually care about. So, JmonsterTW Flesh Terrors, several units of. We also have a few of the JmonsterTW, just get down there, JmonsterTW Predators. Wow, that's a really awkward camera angle. Well, I can't get any farther past there. In any case, these are harassment javelins. They share the same model as some of the other JmonsterTW units. They also have an axe and a shield as their secondaries, but their big selling point is that they are harassment javelins. There's quite a lot of them. As you can see here, most of our harassment javelins tend to fall in the 120 to 140 range, so the JmonsterTW Predators are on the higher end of that. They've also got about 10% extra range over other harassment javelin type units, 5 at least over the Assyrian equivalent. So coupled with the extra numbers and the larger amount of projectiles that they can throw simply by being a larger unit, it's actually a very efficient skirmisher. It's something that pairs quite nicely with the rest of the roster, such as the Flesh Terrors, or such as this unit that you can see here behind you. This is a unit that comes out of Botet, so the beginning of the End Times mod. Again, we lean very heavily into their assets because they just simply have the best around, and it's good and ready to go for our purposes. So I'm going to, again, put a link down in our description. You guys can check that out in your own time. But for the meanwhile, the Karangari Gore Swarm. Karangari means, I believe it's red web, or like red maw, in whatever language it is that the Doriath elves speak. I can't quite remember. It's Sylvan Elf or something like that. In any case, they are another anti-cavalry tool. They die like dogs, absolutely. They are locked morale, and they are extremely individually fragile. So these can be wiped out in 1 or 2 good charges from a Lancer unit. That being said, they do have a nasty bite, and they can do some pretty serious damage to cavalry that gets left in with them. They can also hide anywhere, so you can use them for launching ambushes, but they are not exactly the fastest unit around. So the Karangari Gore Swarm are yet another sort of tar pit unit that you can just throw under the boots and in the way of your more important units. It looks like we're going to have about 4 or perhaps even 5 units of the Karangari Gore Swarm on the field today. But now, we can move into the really cool stuff, the Spider Riders, because of course it is Dungortheb, the home of the vicious brood of Ungoliant. Here I have one of the smaller spider cavalry units, technically for the purposes of game mechanics, considered to be a horse. Don't think too much about it. The Karangari Bloodgorgers are heavily armored, dual-wielding axe infantry. They hit like trucks, they've got a brutal charge bonus, but they are not armor-piercing. That being said, because of their low model count, they actually have about 5 armor per model. That being said, there are some serious counters to these units in the game, especially with the Avari faction, who do it a little bit better than everybody else does. So the Karangari Bloodgorgers can be kept in check, but you're generally going to want to skirmish down the spider units. They're really the one of 2 heavily armored units that the horrors of Dungortheb can field. The other one we're not going to see in this matchup, but it is a unmounted version of the Bloodgorgers called the Flesh Feasters. They are the JmonsterTW Flesh Feasters, and they happen to be the only morale buffing unit that Dungortheb can field. Yeah, it's just those 2 heavily armored units. Everything else that isn't orc and most of their monsters as well, are all very lightly armored. So it goes without saying, therefore, that Dungortheb is quite weak to skirmish fire. And here's a good unit that is an example of that. These again come from Botet, beginning of the End Times mod. There's obviously a little bit of issue with probably the alpha being used for this, because it's not supposed to have that little white outline. It's something that we will fix eventually. But for now, these are the Devourers of Children, which I honestly got the idea to add to the Dungortheb faction after spending several weeks in the woods listening to spooky podcasts. The Devourers of Children are very lightly armored, very quick, and they also have some pretty decent numbers and very high HP. However, to stop them from just being another troll unit and to ensure that they have some sort of well-contoured weaknesses and uses, there's a couple things that are a little bit different about them. One, they can rout. That's probably the biggest one. And two, they take a -4 or a -5 penalty against cavalry. And three, well, this was a similarity with other troll units, but it is worth mentioning because it does differentiate them somewhat from the other larger-than-man-sized units. They're considered to be infantry. And so cavalry are a very hard counter to them. And that actually is a nice segue into one of Dungortheb's other weaknesses. Besides the light armor, they don't have a ton of means of dealing with cavalry, and so factions like Feanor, or even Taur-im-Duinath can be extremely difficult for them to address outside of their monster units. And then there's a lot of other soft counters that come into play there, especially with some of the Taur-im-Duinath ward units. The armor-piercing ones can be very nasty to the monsters, and the melee cavalry from the House of Feanor can just simply outlast them while dealing steady damage in return. So yes, that is something that you want to be aware of when you're playing against Dungortheb. Not going to have to worry about it today, however, because they will be playing against the Avari, and the Avari don't have cavalry. In behind them, we have one of the nastier creatures. These are the Karangari Broodmother. There are two variants of this. One of them is a legendary company, LC for short, for those of you unfamiliar with our nomenclature. But the Karangari Broodmother sacrifice certain aspects, which we'll talk about when we get to the Hungering Maw, in exchange for a larger model count. They've also got a few of the Dusamanuth Predators on top there to toss some harassment javelins. I think there's like 3 or 4 of them or so on top. There's like 3 of them and a rider. So it's a little bit of extra mid-range support. Really, you're not bringing them for the javelins. You're bringing them for the fact that they can smash things up in melee. Now, Karangari Broodmother, unlike many other elephants, can in fact be routed. Now, they have a normal response to morale shocks, and they are an elephant unit, so things like fire arrows or fiery projectiles, for example, can be extremely efficient against them, as are all of the other anti-elephant, anti-armor tools. They've got a very vicious bite from the front, and they attack quite quickly. Not quite as quick as the other variant. They are a little bit slower in that regard, and they don't actually hit in a larger area, or in the same area as the Hungering Maw does, but there are more of them, so you will deal more damage in close quarters, which is kind of what this particular unit is designed to do. I believe they're also lacking in armor piercing for their melee attack, which sets them apart somewhat from the other elephant units. Now, I have had people in the comments in the last video asking why we would do that, and it's really gameplay purposes. Armor piercing is extremely powerful, and when you add it on to units like the Karangari Broodmothers, you can attack in a fairly sizable area. It can quickly get out of hand, especially given that there are lots of them here. So really, I want them to rely on their numbers rather than brute force damage, which is what the Legendary Company is instead going to focus on. So there's a means there of differentiating 2 different units and giving them, space within the roster to fulfill their own rules. So that's one of the reasons why we do things like that. Yes, I realize that big crushing jaws and giant flailing limbs would probably crush you inside a suit of armor, but bear with me, it is a video game first. But in any case, that is the Karangari Bloodgorger, or the Broodmother right there. And let's see if we can find the Hungering Maw. Now, I know, yes, we've got a few of the other units out here as well. Worth noting that there are other spider units. Dungortheb has at least 3 spider units at the moment, and another one on the way. Here we have the Hungering Maw, which is the Legendary Company variant of the Karangari Broodmother. In terms of the custom lore that we've drawn up for the faction, the Hungering Maw is one of the deadly predators within the Valley of Dungortheb, the Valley of Dreadful Death. It will occasionally descend from the heights in order to... Oh, it just disappeared on us. Let's see if we can find her again. I think it's going to be over here. I think it ends up over here. Yeah, that's right. So it descends from the heights, gorges itself by spitting acid over its prey, and then licking up the partially digested juices and crunching on the melted corpses of those unfortunate enough to get in its way when it's on one of those sort of blood-drunk rampages throughout the valley. At that point, many of the nearby creatures will rally together in order to push the Hungering Maw back into the heights of the mountain where they can live out, so that they can live out the rest of their lives in, I wouldn't call it safety, but it really just is a return to business as normal. So the Hungering Maw, quite the scary unit in terms of the brass tacks of how it functions. It's got a higher radius of its melee attack than the Karangari Broodmother. It also has a fun little projectile that is extremely disruptive, armor piercing, body piercing, and currently lacking its final projectile effects. It will be spitting like a green acid for the time being. It spits out just regular old fire, and it spits it out of its butt. I will be changing that so that it spits out of its mouth eventually, but again, work in progress. It is otherwise functioning in terms of gameplay the way it is intended to. And try not to pay attention to the little torch up there. It's just like its little wand. It's a wizard spider. Don't think too hard about it. In any case, I'm gonna pop over here. We have some more spider units to take a look at today. These are the Karangari Hunters. Now, this is a hybrid unit. For the purposes of traits and so forth, they are considered to be a mid-tier unit. I believe they also lack a strong morale response trait, so it's a little bit easier to rout off the Hunters. But they do still ride spiders, so they've got about 3 HP each. They've got poisoned arrows, because of course they do. That long-range sting is just very thematic and it makes a lot of sense. And it does tie into one of the other interesting aspects of Dungortheb, in that they have a fairly high instance of fear-causing traits. Most units don't cause fear to both cavalry and infantry. Most of them cause it to one or the other. These ones in particular cause fear to mounts. However, their poison damage arrow does confer a -2 penalty to the morale of units that it hits within, I believe, a 10-foot area for about 4 seconds. So it does give you some opportunities to create a little bit of routing, and yeah, really just hammer home that sort of horrifying fear factor that comes with giant spiders jumping on top of you and devouring your friends in front of you. We're going to see 2 of them on the battlefield today. Oh, never mind, we're actually going to see 3 of them. In terms of statistics, they've got decent enough melee defense. They've got quite low to medium armor, having about 6, and they don't have a shield. I have altered the spacing on them such that they do kind of run quite close together. And that just makes it easier for you to hit them with their projectiles and sort of, or with your own projectiles, and really drive home that high offensive capability, good mobility in particular, but still weak to counterattacks. That being said, the 3 HP is very, very nice. It's sort of the equivalent of them having 75 without having the damage output of 75 archers, the burst damage output, and the ammunition, etc., etc. So that is most of the Dungortheb roster. There are still, I think, 3 or 4 units that are currently available that are not here, and then there is 1 other unit, and I'll tell you what that is now because I'm interested in how people are going to receive it. That would be the Karangari Baneling, and for those of you who play StarCraft 2, it functions more or less similar to how that unit does. Obviously, with all of these elephant units, and with the lack of, say, polearms, armor piercing, things like that, it can be very difficult for Nan sometimes to really punch through heavily armored defensive lines that are defended by, pikes, halberds, two-handed spears, that kind of thing, without being able to use mobility to their advantage and things like that. And so the Baneling is kind of an answer to that. The basic idea is that it will run into enemies, self-detonate, deal damage probably depending on how we decide to implement the Baneling, whether it's 1 or 2 Banelings, or, you know, 3, 4, 5 of them, the radius will go up and down. If it's a single Baneling, then it'll probably be, you know, 10 models in radius, which can be potentially very, very devastating. If it's 2, then it'll be a little bit less than that, and if it's like 5 or 6 Banelings, then, you know, maybe you're looking at 4 models or 3 models in radius. Things like that. So yeah, the Baneling has yet to be implemented and tested. We do have a model for it, and I do have a good idea of how those mechanics work, so it's really just a matter of time. But again, I just wanted to get this faction out, get like proof of concept, and the majority of it is in fact finished. We will go into more in-depth on the roster throughout the subsequent replays. There are going to be lots of NAN replays in the near future because our testers are playing with them quite a lot. But for now, let's go take a look at the Avari. There's going to be a few other units over there that you did not have a chance to see in the last battle. So let's go take a look at what his Farkin here's opponent is bringing to the battle today. Across the field from Farkin, we have the army of Rex Gervais. He's going to be playing the Avari of Taur-im-Duinath today. He's brought some Bow Wards of the Darkling Woods, a very dependable front line. We've also got some more of the Stone Hewers here, and we've seen, I think, a fairly good indication of the power of the Stone Hewers in our last game. They are quite efficient, and against all the chaff that Dungortheb have, this is actually a really solid investment, especially if you're willing to put some chevrons and attack upgrades on them. Another unit of the Stone Hewers there. We've got at least 3 units of the Thorncasters, a unit that I think we're a little bit familiar with at this point. They are kind of a unique harassment javelin. So in terms of the mid-range fight, I would say that the Avari potentially have the advantage there, at least in terms of the javelin skirmishers. These guys will trade very efficiently with the Dusomanuthan Predators, and they've got pretty good armor to boot, whereas the Dusomanuthan units just simply do not, so they will fall much more quickly than the Thorncasters in a prolonged skirmish. Over here we have some of the high-tier units from the Avari that we have not seen yet. These here are the Rangers of the Hidden Path. They are poison damage, am I calling them Hunter Javelins still? Yes, I am. So poison damage, Hunter Javelins, high base damage, armor piercing, less range than your harassment javelins, and far less ammunition as well. That being said, because of the high base damage, they're extremely effective at dealing with monsters or armor, and there's just so many good targets for the Rangers of the Hidden Path, and as well as the rest of the Avaran high tier roster. These units are able to hide anywhere, so they can be sort of the core of your ambush force. I believe we've got 2 to 3 of them on the field today. Over here we have some Shades of the Guarded Path. This is another one of the Avari bodyguard units. There are 2 bodyguard units in total. I think we're only going to be seeing the Shades today, so there are still some Avaran units that you have not seen yet. The Shades of the Guarded Path, in terms of our own custom lore, are the bodyguards of the Chieftain, and they follow him into the grave. So when the Chieftain dies, they either die in combat or they slay themselves ritualistically afterwards. So they are essentially walking ghosts who follow their leader around until their demise, hence the name Shades. They're dead men walking. Which for the Eldar who live forever, I feel that's quite a significant gesture. That's a real sacrifice. Over here we have the Host of the Withered Ash. Now these are the legendary company for the Avari Elves, and they're one of the only legendary companies that you can actually bring 2 of. That being said, they have a serious price tag on them, and they are a 2-handed variant of the Bow Wards, who we just saw earlier. In terms of how they're different, they are medium armors. They've got, I believe, 5 or 6 armor, possibly even a little bit higher. They've got 2-handed spears, which gives them some serious bonuses against monster units, and they can also use the spear wall formation, which is a force multiplier of epic proportions from the front. You're going to be getting multiple attacks from these guys. They hit really hard too for 2-handed spears, and they've got exceptionally good melee defense. And of course, they don't have a shield. Now, in Summer Ruling, we treat things a little bit differently. We allow spear wall units to have a passive shield value, but these guys actually take a penalty on it, so they only have 1 shield instead of 2. And so they are extremely, extremely vulnerable to missile fire. One of the other big draws of this unit is the fact that they are locked morale. They will fight to the bitter end. There'll be more lore on these guys forthcoming at a later date, but we are kind of running a little bit over time with the introductions here. More of the Bow Wards of the Darkling Woods. They're going to be hiding out here. And I know we've got another couple of high-tier units as well. More Stone Hewers. Got the Shades here taking up position alongside the Host of the Withered Ash. And there are a couple of other hidden Avari units here, such as the Branch Stalkers of the Green Sea. And there's some hidden tree units here as well. So I'll talk a little bit about the Branch Stalkers first. They are a sort of mid-range supremacy chaff grinder unit. They've got throwing knives, whose functionality we're still kind of working out. They're a little bit buggy at the moment in how they throw. But they've also got 2 axes that they wield in close quarters, and they can really grind up chaff extremely efficiently, especially light chaff, such as what we've seen so far from Dungortheb. So a lot of really nice choices here from Rex Gervais, and yeah, we'll see how the horrors of Dungortheb manage to address them. Don't mind this. The sprite for the Karangari Gore Swarm is currently a little bit bugged. Yeah, bugged. Anyway, there's also the Thorny Ancients who are here, and we're going to fast forward just a little bit so I can show you guys the model of them, and then we're going to jump into this battle. Haha, now here we are. These are the Thorny Ancients of Taur-im-Duinath. They are one of the only truly heavily armored units that the Avari can field. They are absolutely ferocious in close quarters. Now, their attack values are quite middling, and their melee defense is a little bit below average, having only 8 melee defense, but they've got 12 armor, which makes them extremely tanky. They've also got a ton of HP. I believe they've got 7 or 8 HP, something like that. So this is one of the units that the Avari can rely on as either a tool to create blobs or something to help them hold the line for a long period of time. They are technically infantry, just like the Devourers of Children, but they do not have any penalties against cavalry whatsoever, so that is something to consider as well. Over here, we have some Branch Stalkers of the Green Sea. You can kind of see them here with a bit of a barn owl mask. They've got throwing daggers, got their axes there, and if you look on the back, this is actually a really nice touch by Stewart of Dale, who made this model. There's little wings there you can see that extend down the backs of their arms, and they've also got, can't really see them on all of the units, but they've also got the little talons there as well. So the Avari are themed after woodland beasts. Obviously the Rangers have the horns and stuff from the deer. These guys are owls, and the other units who I don't know if you've seen yet. No, you haven't seen them just yet. They are themed after something else entirely. And so, I think that covers it for the Avari army. Let's go ahead, rewind this, and then we're going to jump into the battle. Hope you guys enjoy it. Now, there's a few interesting notes on deployment here, and it's one of the reasons that I kind of like this map. Oddly enough, even though I made it for a 3v3, as a 1v1 map, it does kind of split things up and give you the option to, well, do a lot of things. You can hide stuff in the middle. There's many places to hide in the back here, so you can use your fast-moving units to launch quick ambushes. You can push through here, and there's going to be a lot of different terrain bonuses at play, but you can also launch 3-pronged attacks, and you can feint a little bit. Well, not feint, but sort of dissimulate your intentions. So you can send 2 large conspicuous forces around forward towards the center, and then when all is said and done, you can have some hidden units in reserve and then throw them right up the center into the middle of your enemy's army. And if you choose your moment wisely and you keep the right units in reserve, then that's potentially game winning for you. I've also got a different kind of unit here. No, never mind, that's the flesh eaters, the flesh terrors rather. They have a lot of names that I'm still wrapping my head around, despite the fact that I made those names. In any case, so the Avari player has committed a decent amount of troops over here. I think he's expecting something to come through here, so he's definitely prepared for it. The main thrust of his army appears to be over here, and you can see Rex falling back using some of the terrain to try and create some artificial choke points. So these little bits right here are not just for show. In fact, they are also things you can use tactically to create difficult kill zones and choke points that your enemy must then push through. So that's quite clever. I believe he had some hidden units over here as well, some rangers. Oh, he has the grandfather. Don't think we saw him earlier, but you're probably well familiar with the grandfather at this point and what he can do, especially against light infantry. So that's something that the horrors of Dungortheb definitely need to be afraid of. And you can see there's some hidden units here, so this is just so sneaky, and one of the reasons I like this map. So perhaps a little on the nose, but the spiders are hiding out near the spider nest, and the Avari player saw all of that, and I think maybe he's thinking that's the main thrust of the army, because he is going to pull everything that he had hidden in reserve here back. He's going to try and counter this this thrust here to the best of his ability. So you can see, definitely need to fix that sprite. The Karangari Gore Swarm coming in hot, taking it on the chin here from the Branch Stalkers. Unfortunately, they're, as I mentioned, their throwing animation right now is a little bit bugged, so they're not going to do the damage on the approach that I think they could otherwise do. They're able to throw as a unit, but the Karangari Gore Swarm are going to collide with them and just watch them die here. Yeah, it's really nothing. But again, they're just there to kind of get in the way, and the Hungering Maw taking point here, smelling a little bit of blood in the water. There's definitely a big gap in the line and nothing currently covering it. There are some Thorncasters laying down the pain, but honestly, their base damage is so low that the Hungering Maw just isn't going to care. So it's going to turn around here, and it's going to go for a really, really devastating shot into the flank of these units. And this is the sort of like tactical craziness I think that you can expect in the next patch, but it actually, despite the fact that that was a beautiful shot, kills about 11 models out of the light infantry. So it's not the end of the world, but still a really nice shot there, getting some good value out of the Hungering Maw, but he probably wants to pull out of there as quickly as he can, because constant Thorncaster pressure will slowly take a toll, but it will take a toll nonetheless. So the Hungering Maw just kind of moving around, looking for good opportunities here, and this is the sort of positional play that I really like to try and promote in Silmarillion Total War. We do that in a lot of different ways. These projectiles are just simply one of them. So the Hungering Maw here getting very close to the front line. Now, the Stone Heroes could rush forward and try to engage him in close quarters, maybe stop the projectile, but they would definitely be at a little bit of disadvantage there. The Hungering Maw is great at grinding up infantry. And another big shot. That fire ripping through the ranks here. Many of those Gore Swarm already beginning to expire, and I think perhaps Farkin is going to begin to pull back the Hungering Maw. So a lot of these buffer units have now begun to die off. Do some Manuthan Predators in the way, and they're going to really do a number on the hosts of the Withered Ash. 3 of them focus firing them. This lighter spearman unit is just simply not going to be long for this world. They pushed a little bit too far forward here. This is a unit that is quite expensive, that I personally would have kept in reserve to help me deal with things like the Hungering Maw, to chase them down or to defend my back lines from Karangari Bloodgorgers, who we can see making a deep flanking maneuver here through the woods. And they actually got a nice hit off onto the Rangers. They're going to take at least one full volley right on the chin. Now the Rangers have pretty good melee defense. They've got about 21 melee defense. They wield daggers in close quarters with decent enough damage behind them, so they can stand up to those charges relatively well with 21 MD, which is one of the higher MD scores in the game. But nonetheless, they will still take casualties, especially once those Bloodgorgers get in there and they start whacking people to death. Now, Rex Gervais trying to reform here, probably wants to get a piece of the Devourers of Children. I think he was already tossing into them, and the Karangari Bloodgorgers had something to say about that. Meanwhile, on the front lines, you can see the Hungering Maw going hard here, just punishing these blobs of Varan infantry. Karangari Blood Swarm basically died off like the pathetic little insects they are. They got stepped on, and some more flanking shots here, dealing an okay amount of damage. But as you can see, I think it's a fairly finely tuned projectile. Like, it can be punishing, and it can hurt a lot, but it's something that's going to take time to do, and that requires setup. Meanwhile, over here, the Stone Heroes have pushed through into the Dusum Manuthan Predators, and quite predictably, especially with the Battle Guard support, they are grinding them to pieces. It says the Predators are winning here, but honestly, it's this is a foregone conclusion. The Stone Heroes will cut their way through here like nobody's business. In the center, Thorncasters. This is wide open. I personally would have taken one unit of Thorncasters and thrown them in here, and then used a second unit in behind to just bombard these guys. 9 armor on the Thorncasters. Even with the armor piercing, it's still decent enough odds for your own units, and then you're disrupting that entire skirmish line and dealing like basically critical casualties to them. So I think Rex has recognized the opportunity, perhaps, or maybe he wants to go like toe-to-toe skirmishing with them. But yeah, I definitely would have thrown them in here against the Predators and then used a little bit of support. In the back, host of the Withered Ash, a small band of them rallying together, fearless as always, poking at the backs of these Dusa-Manuthran Predators. Meanwhile, behind the lines, some more Thorncasters here. Looks like they're probably hunting down some of the Karangari hunters who have been brought out of hiding in behind the lines of the Avari units. And this is, again, why I love this map so much. You can bait people into overcommitting, and you can really punish them for it because there's enough terrain and enough... You can like create enough distractions that they're just not going to see it. It's a smoke screen that sort of helps you do what needs to be done and launch those critical ambushes, especially as factions like, say, the Avari or Dungortheb. Over here, Rangers of the Hidden Path looks like they took it on the chin from the Hungering Maw, but in return they slew him, and he is done. Or she, I don't know. Whatever you want it to be, really. It's 2021. Karangari Bloodgorgers, they don't really like this fight too much. They're not going to really want to stick in there for too long, but with these Karangari Hunters there, these units could just be swamped. Like, the Karangari Hunters could just charge in there against Rangers of the Hidden Path and really deal a lot of damage to them. Hopefully these Rangers can get themselves online quickly enough. Over here, the other Rangers are helping the Thorny Ancients and the Stone Heroes take down the Devourers of Children. They've done a decent amount of damage, especially, you know, putting them together. Ooh, there goes the Avari General. That's really bad news. But they just didn't really have a lot of support, and so the Devourers are actually going to fall away here. That's a decent amount of money down the drain. That's at least 2,000 gold right there. They're around 1,000 or so a piece plus upgrades, so yeah, not great for him. Over here, Grandfather charging into some Dusa-Manuthran Flesh Terrors. The ambush from the center has been launched, and Shades were brought in alongside the Bow Wards there, but it's just not enough. So the Shades here doing great. They've managed to grind down quite a lot of these units, being axe units, and bodyguard axe units at that. They do somewhat compensate for the lower defensive stats of axe units in the mod, and it just really is a recipe for making them amazing chaff grinding units. Over here, Grandfather coming in from the back. I think he's going to have something to say about this. He's just going to smack these Dusa-Manuthran orcs. They come with fire, they come with axes, gnawing, biting, breaking, hacking, burning, but they ain't got nothing on what the Grandfather can do to bunched up blobs of light and medium infantry, and those Dusa-Manuthran orcs are definitely going to feel his wrath as they get tickled to death by that oversized angry tree man. Over here, Branch Stalkers of the Green Sea, unfortunately were not able to use a lot of their ammunition, really down to the bug animations, and so I think they were in the back here trying to do that, but they kind of got pinned between two units of the Dusa-Manuthran Flesh Terrors, and that low armor is really going to tell here. These Branch Stalkers are not long for this world. There's a second unit of them over here defending the farmhouse, but they're actually grinding down quite a lot of these guys despite their very low numbers. They're outnumbered here like 4-1. Still, pardon me, holding their own, taking down a lot of those Dusa-Manuthran Predators with them. This is maybe a little bit better gauge of the efficacy of this unit once you commit it against the right target. Over here, it looks like probably the Dusa-Manuthran Predators managed to kill off most of that unit. So some really devastating focus fire from the mid-range Javelin Corps of the Dungortheb line was just able to do some terrible, terrible damage to the Avaran roster, to a really, really expensive unit, and potentially game-changing unit as well. So that's something that the Avari player was just not really able to stop from happening, just wasn't able to get in there and disrupt that skirmish corps. And again, the tactic I suggested earlier, I think would have gone a long way towards making that happen. Rangers of the Hidden Path, probably a third unit of them pulling out here. Thorny Ancients, along with some Stone Hewers, pinning these Dusa-Manuthran Flesh Terrors together. Now, these are locked morale units. They will basically fight forever. at least until they all expire. But now with the Grandfather converging on this position, that looks like they are not going to be not long for this world. Karangari Bloodgorgers over here looking a little bit worse for wear, rushing past the corpse of the Hungering Maw. But this is a little bit troublesome. So there's 3 units here of the Karangari Hunters who are basically untouched, and there's no long-range units. I haven't seen any of the Maw Stalkers in this Avari army that can be used to zone these guys out, weaken them a little bit, and of course there are no cavalry and things like that. So now the Karangari Bloodgorgers kind of leading the way. Oh no! The nasty Broodmothers have now been brought to bear against one of their hard counters. Now it's important to note that there have been some really significant mass changes that drastically affect the way that elephant units like this work. Now you'll notice that they can still push through, which I think is intuitive because they are a very large unit. However, they're not knocking over people like so many bowling pins as they do so. And that is important because it gives infantry counters the damage window that they need in order to like scare elephant units enough. You know what I mean? Before elephant units can just kind of bowl them over and run through them and just very easily avoid them. But now that damage window is there, so it is dangerous for them to do that. There's not a lot of hard counters in the Avari army to these units aside from the Rangers of the Hidden Path, and they're really only scary at range if they can kind of distance themselves here. But again, this is where the host of the Withered Ash would have been extremely important, and why it would be useful to try and keep them in reserve and keep them away from missile units who can shut them down. If we had the host of the Withered Ash in here, they actually have extra bonuses against elephants. So if they were able to get in here, get some charges off, and utilize those bonuses against large targets, they could probably kill off, you know, 1 or 2 of the Karangari Broodmothers very, very quickly, and that might be enough to simply rout them off. This is bad news bears here. Grandfather of Deepwood Hearth, kind of surrounded on all sides, I mean, he's like a tiny little Japanese girl surrounded by a ton of tentacled monsters. This is not the place that he wants to be in any way, shape, or form. This is just going to be ugly unless the Avari player Rex can do something to kind of rescue the Grandfather. Like, he's going to put up a decent fight. He's got HP. There's a lot that he can do. But against the overwhelming force here, it's just going to be too much. So the Avari Blob kind of coming in here, Bow Wards mixed in with the Stonehewers. Stonehewers have a decent amount of damage, potentially enough to over time wear down the Karangari Broodmothers, but I think we're going to see, you know, the true power of these units here once they converge upon these Stormcasters. Yeah, they can really do a lot of damage. This is why, again, these kind of units don't have armor piercing, because it would just cause them to be complete wrecking balls. Now this is a really big moment in the battle. 23 of the Rangers, one of the few hard counters still remaining to the Karangari Broodmother, trying to set up, but there's really no intervening units, such as, for example, the host of the Withered Ash could have been helpful. And then these units would have had to think twice about pushing in there. But the Karangari Broodmothers easily got on top of the Rangers of the Hidden Path, and now they are completely crushing them. Even with the help from the Thorny Ancients here, it's just not going to be enough. They don't have the damage. They're not a damage-dealing unit. They're a tanky unit that can grind people down over time, but when it comes to, you know, dealing with 25 armor, which is what the Broodmothers have, it's just not going to be enough. Meanwhile, over here, Karangari Hunters circling this massacre. The Avari have managed to win the infantry fight, as you would expect from them, but now we're really down to the monsters here, and there's just no hard counters left. There is some possibility if they can fell the Bloodgorgers. I believe the general is in this. No, indeed he is not. He's actually on top of the Broodmother here. Now, if they could bring this Broodmother down, that would go a really, really long way towards helping them deal with some of the remaining monsters on the field. But there's just so much mobility and monster power still remaining from Dungortheb, so really all they've lost is the Duso-Manuthan units, and they can afford to spend their lives quite frivolously, whereas for units like the Karangari Hunters and their larger monsters, indeed, they cannot do that. So we're going to go ahead, kick it into full speed here as this battle approaches its zenith, and this is really the big moment here. A lot of the Avari units now running for the hills, having been slain by the Karangari Broodmother. The Shades fighting back to back with one another, trying to defend, well, not their lord, he's dead, but certainly trying to gain some measure of redemption by felling these great beasts. But it's just too much. You cannot in Silmarillion expect infantry blobs, even of just plain old mid-tier spearmen, to be able to hack through the armor of large elephant units. You need to bring those hard and soft counters to bear. Axemen are good at it. I believe they get a +2, which brings up the Stone Hewers, if upgraded, to around 15 damage. Not bad. Can be done over time, but they are, of course, quite vulnerable to counterattacks from those big monsters' bites and things like that. Really what you need are two-handed spears, javelins, and pikes and halberds if you have them. Or other large monsters. Two-handed axemen and macemen are also very good at it. These are things that the Avari just either had and weren't able to defend, or simply lack as part of their faction. Over here, the Karangari Hunters charging their way through the Battle Wards. Some of the Karangari Hunters have died off. These Battle Wards are pretty well going to fight more or less to the end. Yeah, 7 of them there are going to rout off. They're going to have to rout through a horde of angry spider-riding orcs, so they are not long for this world either. A small group of Thorncasters up here on the field, making a last stand alongside the Grandfather, trying to take down some of these spider units as they push up. Looks like they were successful in taking down a few of them, but it's just not going to be enough. So our final percentages here, 95 to 98, still relatively close, at least in terms of the percentages. In terms of what Nan actually has left over at the end of the battle, it's a fairly decisive win for Nan Dungortheb. The spiders were just kind of left to do their own thing. There were some expensive units that were taken down by far cheaper ones, and the hard counters to the monsters, they just weren't able to be active and to stay online, basically, the way that Rex needed them to in order to pull out a win here. If he was able to, say, take 2 of his ranger units and fire them into the Karangari units here, they would most likely melt upon contact. And certainly kill, 1 or 2 spiders, and that might be enough to cause panic and send the rest of them fleeing. And then all he really has to do is deal with the Karangari hunters. And actually, the Thorncasters are quite good at that. All you gotta do is get within 100 meters of them, and then they can really lay down the pain, especially if you let them sit there for a while. So yeah, an interesting match. I think it's a pretty good showcase for Nan, because it does show off just how powerful their monsters are, and also how weak some of their other units are. We saw the Duso-Manuthan units just simply melted. The Javelin Skirmishers were able to get the job done against some really important units for Captain Gervais, but ultimately, those units had a minimal impact on the battle. They lost the infantry fight very, very handily to the Avari. They absolutely got their clocks cleaned there, but the Avari player was able to use the momentum of those big monsters, stay on top of the hard counters, a lot of cycle charging, and some really nice ambushing and use of the map as well in order to pull out a victory here against the Avari. So, pretty cool. I enjoyed this match. Let's take a look at who did what. Hungering Maw, 138. Not great. I mean, it's a single entity unit. Not bad, but it got 138 kills and it's got a 1650 price tag, so you can do the math on that, whether or not it's actually worth it. Karangari Hunters did really well. The Blood Gorgers were able to kind of get on top of some really important units. A lot of those are actually the Rangers of the Hidden Path kills, so that's quite significant. The Karangari Gore Swarm basically just died, but that's what they're there to do. Devourers of Children, they kind of underperformed in this battle, but again, they were a little bit unsupported against some big scary blobs of Avari infantry. Predators did super well. You can see the skirmish units performing quite nicely. And then the Loch Morale infantry, some of them actually performed very nicely. 100 and even 80 on a unit like that is actually not that bad. I think a lot of that comes from fighting some of the spearmen. There's at least 140 kills in there that definitely come from the spearmen. Some of them are the Shades, so that's pretty good. But overall, I think you can kind of see where the strengths and weaknesses of this particular faction lie. So yeah, was really excited to show this off. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I hope you're excited for the new maps we've got coming out. yeah, we've just got so many new things planned. We may have swimming up and running for certain units, which means they will be able to incorporate more rivers into our map design, and then you can actually use those as like a tactical feature. I think that'll really change up the way that a lot of games play by just like opening up a huge new range of like traversal abilities. So that's really cool. Hopefully that works out. But yeah, stay tuned for more. Definitely gonna have some more Nan action and Avari action in the future. There will be some more Valinor games, and of course, I mentioned in a post on the channel a little bit earlier this morning. Well, by the time this comes out, it may not have been this morning. It may be several days later. But in any case, an earlier post, we do have some new factions coming out, and I would like to at least give you the name of those so far, so you can get a little bit excited for them. One of them is the Brood of Glaurung. It will now be its own unique thing rather than simply an Angband reskin with more dragons. It will have its own sort of unique way of approaching battle. It won't be a single player faction. It will be an AI only faction, but you will be able to play them in multiplayer. It does spice things up a little bit, adding another evil faction. And the other one, really cool. I'm actually super excited about this. I don't have a lot to do with this faction. This is mostly done by some of our other developers. But it is are they the Grey Elves? I don't know if they're the Grey Elves. I think Mithrim. They're the Elves of Mithrim, which I believe is like the Grey Mountains or something like that. And they are going to have their own unique roster. Again, another AI-only faction, not something you'll be able to play in campaign, at least not from what we have planned right now. But you will be able to play the multiplayer, and they will be separate and distinct from the other Elven factions. They'll have all their own custom models and things like that, and their own, of course, playstyle. So that's really exciting. Glaurung, I keep wanting to call them the Grey Elves. It's not. That's the Sindar. The Elves of Mithrim. The Dwarves are, of course, coming up, and now we have these two new factions, so that brings us to a total of 17. Really exciting. I won't keep you any longer, however. Hope you guys have enjoyed this so far. My name is Jordan, also known as JMonster, and I hope you join me for the next video. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye!